It's Wednesday. Let's chat. Hi, I'm Kanan Chandran, the publisher of StormAsia.com, and this is our regular series of discussions, the Wednesday Web Chat, or the WED Web Chat. And today we are talking about excitement, right? We want to see what makes Singapore exciting. Everybody has a stake in this country. Everybody has a say in this country. So we'd like to hear what you've got to say. We've got panelists who will weigh in with their views. And of course, the audience, feel free to ask your questions through the Q&A and chat boxes. And, let this be a free-flowing discussion. Now, to me, as I was growing up, excitement was the first time I went to the beach, the first time going to a fair, the anticipation, the things I've heard about it. It was something new. It fired the imagination. Then we went, then we experienced it. And after a few times, it wasn't that exciting anymore. We kind of got used to it, right? So it's a question of whether, is excitement about the things that trigger your imagination? What are the things that you feel will be useful to you as well? Because as you journey through life, excitement becomes a lot of experiences that are yet to be fulfilled, maybe. If you're as far down the road as I am, then you would have lived through a number of things, you'd seen a number of things, participated in many things. So a lot of things may not be that exciting anymore. But as a country that need to remain exciting for different reasons is always there. There's the need to keep the population excited, but not too excited. You need to keep the business environment very exciting for people who want to come in and invest. And you also want to have an environment where people are living a happy life. Now, excitement covers many areas, and can we have too much of it? That's another question that we need to ask as well. So today's session, practical to some extent, philosophical to a large extent, and we've got just the right mix of panelists to deliver on that front. We'll start with the youngest, the baby and the lady in the group, Emma Goh. She's a research assistant with the Lee Kuan Yew Center of Innovative Studies at the SUTD. We've got Roberto Fabbri, who is the MD of SIB Consulting, and he's done a lot of business in bringing Italian companies into Singapore as well, and he is an art connoisseur to boot, and among many other things. We've got Paul Tan, who's the former Deputy CEO of the National Arts Council and is now pursuing a PhD course at the NTU. And we've got Jin Ooi, who's the Managing Director of the Distilleri Pte Ltd, a communications agency, and his company is also bringing in the Grand Prix season Singapore. Welcome everybody to today's session, and if we could just start the ball rolling with Emma, if you could just tell us a bit more about yourself and what excites you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Kanan. So as Kanan has mentioned, my background's in urban planning, and my current research interests are in aging urbanism and urban innovation. And I'm also really interested in placemaking in the city. Yeah, so even though my background's in urban planning, actually I think what really excites me about the city is its informality, its unplannedness, and actually its messiness. Yeah, I feel it's kind of ironic that I'm saying, because I feel like I'm putting myself out of a job. Yeah, but it's really these kind of interesting moments of exception that really excite me. I guess if I could share a personal experience, just last weekend I was at Geylang for supper, and I was walking along the streets, and suddenly there was this durian seller who had a shop in one of the shop houses, and then he decided to sort of extend his shop very spontaneously to the main road. So he started using some plastic chairs and demarcated with four corners, that this is going to be my new extension of my shop, and I'm just going to sell durians on the main road. And when I passed by, I was like, wow, this is so exciting. I've never seen this before. And I heard other passerbys saying that, oh yeah, you can only see this in Geylang. And I think when I was reflecting on it, why it was particularly interesting and exciting for me, it was because because it was so different. It was so it was in contrast to the usual sanitized and hyper-regulated environment of Singapore that I'm so used to. Yeah, so I think what makes the city exciting for me are actually these spaces of exception Like they're really magical. They represent different modes of existence, like different lived realities that I personally really want to find out more about. Yeah, so yeah, I'll just
Okay.
leave it at that.
Great, thanks, Emma. What you described is was the way of life in Singapore when I was growing up. You know, there were vendors on the street. They invaded everything. So it's maybe going back that way, but the government made a lot of effort to clean things up. So I don't know how they'll view that. But anyway, we can talk about that too. Roberto, tell us a bit more about yourself and what excites you.
I've been living in Singapore since 1980, and what I do for a living, I bring mainly European business to establish their presence here in Asia. I'm not in finance. I bring companies that manufacture things, and I'm passionate for art. But what excited me? Actually, what excited me was your question at the beginning. What excited you? Because looking retrospectively, I realized that, and it's what I commented, excitement is the brain, is an emotion, but you can live with the highs only. You cannot always choose and run after what excites you in that specific moment. So I realized that personally, what excites me at the end of the day is that looking at the past, I have been grown. I have learned new things. I have met new people. I've done things that I never did before. Typical example, I learned to play an instrument 5 years ago. Never learned to play any instruments in my life. Last year, thanks to COVID, I had few skills. And I pick up with the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy for sites, which then augmented or increased the type or the maturity of the advice that I can give to my clients. So, in short, excitement as a process of continuous growth, culturally, ethically, morally, name it. If this is for me as an individual, second question is, should we as a society consider ourselves excited and exciting if looking back, we have seen that we have grown, and we have grown in many things.
Let's hear a bit about your views on Singapore's excitement and your excitement and a bit about yourself.
Thanks a lot, Kanan. Really happy to be invited this afternoon. For the last 10 years, I was working in the Arts Council, which is the Singapore government agency that looks at nurturing and profiling the Singapore arts and culture, and trying to make it part of everyone's lives. Late last year, third quarter last year, I decided to take a break to pursue a PhD in what I would call a kind of a first love, which is in creative writing. So I'm working on a novel. So hopefully that will see the light of day in time. Reflecting on the work that I did, in government, I think the arts and culture, of course, has a role to play in making a place exciting. And I certainly think that with the kind of resourcing that the government has put in, the kind of grants that have been given out, I do think that there's a fair amount of catalyzing of the scene. So whether it's the ballet shows that you watch, whether it's the theater that you watch, whether it's the literary titles that you've been reading, the visual arts, the arts installations you see, both in the museum as well as on the cityscape, I think all that, has got to do with a bit of a deliberate kind of planning and thinking, but also kind of working with artists to kind of see the kind of diversity of content that's possible. So I reflect a little bit on what both you as well as Roberto said, and I think the idea of learning is very useful in terms of what makes something exciting. I certainly would like to think that the arts and culture plays a part, in helping us understand ourselves, understand the world around us. But I also reflect on the point of novelty, which I think, Hanan, you spoke about freshness and newness, and I think somewhere in there there is some of that tension in trying to keep something exciting if it always requires novelty. So I think that's something to reflect on, and maybe we can touch on that, because I think you can't constantly be novel, and you can't constantly try to keep doing new things as well. Sometimes it's worth looking at things from the past as well. And one final point, I mean, while I mentioned arts and culture, I do think that to take it more holistically, I would think that an exciting space is also about, for example, the physical space, a little bit in the Emma space, about whether it's about public art in public spaces, it's about kind of architecture that kind of engages with the community and keeps them, builds a community, gets the community engaged through the physical spaces. I think it's also about even F&B. We have a very exciting F&B scene, and that one's constantly changing, a lot of novelty there. And also sports. I think also a shout out to the sports events that are possible. We've had a bit of hiatus in the last 2 years, but I think, traditionally sports like rugby sevens and all that have got a following, and certainly, of course, F1, which I'm sure Jin Ooi will talk about in a minute. I'll stop here for now. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Jin, over to you. What's a lot of things exciting going on in your place? So let's hear from you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jin. I run an agency called Distilleri. I guess we are the ones in communications, right, that try to make things exciting for everyone. Till today, my parents don't know what I'm doing. When I tell them that I'm in communications, right, they have no idea. So I try to explain to them, we are the ones who make you need the things you don't want and want the things that you don't need, right? And trying to do that, in doing that, right, we create the excitement around products, around behavior, around services, and change the mindset of the people and the behaviors, so that things that you thought were, things and services that you thought were boring previously, we tell a different story, provide you with a different perspective, so that and inject a little bit of excitement back into the product, so that people find it interesting. For example, what we're doing this year is GPSS, which is Grand Prix Season Singapore. Grand Prix, the F1 is not something new that in Singapore. Well, we had Grand Prix seasons for the longest time. What we are doing this year is helping create excitement out of the grandstand, out of the F1 circuit. So things like, for example, you have been to Orchard Road and Clarke Quay a million times, right? And you probably know that you know the shops and services like the back of your hands. What we have done is we are doing something new. We have, for example, we have Urban Green Room stretching all the way from Ngee Ann City to Mandarin Gallery, featuring different merchants and vendors. Like, for example, there is Mattel, and there's also Lego, and we have different activities around those booths, so that people can go and interact and find excitement in Orchard Road and Clarke Quay. Yeah, so that's what we are doing at this point of time.
Okay, great. So we've got a sense of what everybody's into. It's quite varied, so that's great, because I think that means we can touch on a number of different things as we go through this discussion. A lot of the things that you've spoken about, Jin, was about physical things, right? It's about shopping, it's about you touch and feel, you can see. Is our excitement sort of connected to the things that are tangible? Do we have enough excitement going on in our imagination?
I think Singaporeans are a practical bunch, right? There has to be, well, the amount of effort put into it to a certain activity has to commensurate with the payoff. Right? And being a practical bunch, we need to see tangible. I mean, if the excitement that's generated does not equal to the effort, then somehow it doesn't justify the effort. Sorry, going into the philosophical part again. Like, for example, right, the queue, right? At a certain store, I queue for 1 hour, therefore the food has to be that kind of quality and give me that kind of satisfaction. That makes me, I don't know, but maybe in the queue you're already excited, but after queuing and tasting the food, right, you will be disappointed because in your head it doesn't kind of measure up. So excitement is about, to me, excitement is about discovery, and it's about the anticipation of something that is new. Just now when Roberto was introducing himself, right, just before this, he said that, he dives, he scuba dives as well, right? To me, every dive is different, even if you're diving at the same place, because you see different fish, and even if you see the same old landscape, the same old flora and fauna, maybe you have a different dive buddy, right? And maybe the trip to the dive site is also different. So I think we shouldn't set our expectations that high in order to get excited. It's just come what may, and then just revel in the here and now. Yeah.
Okay. Emma, for your generation, you've got a long way to go. You've not lived that many years. You've not experienced so many things. You've done a lot of studying, but you've also done a lot of other things. Which
You make us sound very old. You make us sound very old, Kanan.
No, that's me. I'm talking about me in relation to her. You guys are all young fellas, man. Come on. But, the thing is, when you look to your future, what are the things that would excite you? What do you think your generation wants to do that would be exciting?
And thanks for that question. I think one thing that has always come up in all my conversations with me and my friends about our dreams and aspirations in the kind of spaces they want to see is actually the theme of like diversity and inclusivity. I think for my generation at least, we kind of see that like everybody has very different experiences and we want very different things, and we appreciate that sort of freedom and that organic like co-creation that can happen. I think one thing that I have noticed, at least in our current society, is how a lot of different communities might be structurally and like socially excluded from certain spaces. So, for example, like how our foreign domestic workers are like priced out of like recreational spaces, or like certain like queer communities feel like they don't have safe spaces where they can truly belong. So I think these topics have come up a lot in my conversations with my friends, and there's always that element of like equity and justice when it comes to access or spaces. Because I think in Singapore at least, there are definitely a lot of opportunities to have fun and have excitement. Like the government is constantly pushing out new schemes and we're constantly at the forefront. But I think the question is like, on whose terms can you have fun on? Yeah, so I think, I guess what I really hope is like is to practice more inclusivity and diversity in the spaces that we create, and maybe in certain situations actually suspend planning a little bit to allow communities to shape spaces instead of spaces shaping communities, and for us to actually create excitement on our own terms.
Do you guys think that there's just too much planning going on? Are we over-planned as a city, as a society?
Well, I think there's always that need to have that balance. I think planning is definitely very important, especially when you're talking about like from a more macro perspective and to set the overall direction. But then there's also that need to sort of like preserve our heritage, conserve spaces, allow spaces for communities to thrive in and express their individuality. So I think it's about achieving that balance, which is a pretty challenging and complex task. Yeah.
Maybe I just jump in on to supplement what Emma said. I completely agree. I think that it's a fine balance to strike. I think certainly in some instances, I think there can be a stepping back of that the kind of over planning kind of instinct that sometimes we might have. I do wonder about the tensions even with the durian store in Geylang, right? Because on one hand, from the consumer's point of view or from the shop owner's point of view, it's kind of, I'm building a little space, I'm expanding, let's all be organic. But I wonder, so just as a point of discussion, whether the neighbors would have a view, right? So now I'm thinking a little bit perhaps more like what a planner would be worried about. Would then the neighbors also say, then I will then also stick a claim? And then therefore, will you end up losing car park lots, or reducing Geylang from a 4-lane to a 3-lane, for example? So those kind of very nuts and bolts questions have to be kind of addressed. So what is the right balance? I think as a principle, it's always good to have people have a sense of ownership. So at that level, for sure, but then how do you be mindful of the space that you're operating in? I give you another example. So in my work life, we dealt with a busking scheme, right? So busking is always seen as a great way to make a cityscape very exciting, very lively. But the reality is that, and this is nothing even to do per se with government planning, it's got to do with the spaces that the buskers perform, right? The agency, Arts Council had to go and negotiate with site owners. Some of it's government, but actually a fair number of them are commercial. So like a mall, for example, right? But what might happen is that if you're an inconsiderate busker and your volume is too loud, you are just going to offend not just tenants of the commercial property, but actually also passers-by. Right? So again, that sense of you want excitement, you want your acts to be to be entertaining, but the spaces that you occupy, it could end up being a disamenity. And as much as we want to be inclusive and you want to have all kinds of performers, you might want to have some kind of audition, some kind of filter, so that people are not tone deaf and assaulting the public with their tone deaf music. Okay, so again, some of those kind of fine balances that one has to strike.
Could be a comedy busker then. Good for a street laugh. Yeah. No, but with the NAC, for instance, in your time there, how would you plan for things to take place? I mean, do you look at what levels of excitement this various projects might bring?
I think it's quite hard to quantify what excitement might potentially look like from an outcome point of view, right? Suffice to say that when you commission, let's say for example the NAC commissions the arts festival, and then you leave it to the experts, the festival director, you leave it to the programmers to then plan a good program, right? So the funders would say, can you make sure that you reach a certain number of people, that when you do your audience surveys, the surveys show that people had a good time, that you showcase Singapore artists, even as you invite international acts to town. So these are the kind of broad parameters that a commissioner might have, right? Then it is for the people who are planning it, to actually decide how they want to get the excitement. One way, of course, is to have ownership. So if you have a festival which is anchored in a space, for example, so there are any number of activities which are, let's say, centered at Tampines, our Tampines hub, for example, or if you are working in the Bras Basah Bugis district, right? Then when you program with already a parameter of a space, then it's up to you to how you want to engage the community. An open call is often useful. And quite often, a lot of our arts groups or placemaking agencies do open calls with some funding to say we're inviting ideas. And I think that direction, that way of going, of engaging the community and encouraging kind of people to step up, I think it's a good start. Yeah. So some broad thoughts there. Of course, it is, and the art of this is a little bit much more nuanced than what I'm suggesting. But I think these are the broad strokes.
Okay. Roberto, when you're bringing Italian and European businesses into Singapore, is the excitement level of Singapore something that they consider before making a decision?
Well, this got to deal with how Singapore is seen outside before they move in. Okay. So Singapore is seen as a place that is trustworthy, reliable, where is easier to invest, there is the rule of the law, and excitement doesn't come in the picture. Okay, actually, is really the last things, and what you read when you are not in Singapore about Singapore is give really the perception of a docile society. Okay, nothing really exciting happened here, with few exceptions, because there are few exceptions. When I talk to you about the fact that we have not to underestimate ourselves, maybe we have to address our communication. Jin could be an expert on it. there are certain things that we do excellently, and I will dwell on it in a moment. But first, let's say, so in attractive investment, no, is not, or at least the type of investment that I'm interested in, where I work, that are industrial or commercial, not so much. Actually, the news that are coming out now are not even very pleasant, in the sense of scarcity of manpower, high cost of living, and blah, blah, blah. But when you move here with the family, particularly, now becoming rarer because sending kids to school is becoming very expensive. But the environment here is nice. It's really nice because it's safe, which is not a thing to be taken for granted often. There is a great number of parks, and parks are important. When Lee Kuan Yew was a student in UK, probably was the only thing that he can afford to go to the park, you know. And park, they are an equalizer in society. Doesn't matter how much you earn, you can go to a park, you know. On the other hand, when expats are here, many, they found shopping mall dreadful. Singapore is like Dallas, is like many other things. I think that when you look at Singaporean going out from Singapore, they enjoy buying on the roads, on the streets, small shops. Very seldom they go and eat in another mall. This is, excitement is not, as I say, what enter into the mind of a potential investor, unless in some specific field, but not the one that I know. But can we make it more excitement once they are here, and for ourselves who live here? Yes. I've taken a couple of points from Paul one, for instance. And it may also strand into Emma aspects. Architecture and urban furnishing. I don't know if we have an adequate scheme to reward those who invest in pieces of art, put it in the city to beautify it. But I remember that at a certain point, and was probably maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Paul, you may remember it, big developers were buying Botero. So you see Botero everywhere. And you don't see instead you don't see local sculpture as popular as often. So I wonder, why not? You know, so urban furnishing, there is not enough art around Singapore. And when there is, it's sometimes confined in the park. I say, oh yeah, but if you go to Fort Canning, we have the Asian artists that are put there. Yeah, how many people goes to Fort Canning? Period. You know? And the same, I remember when I came here, bonification of Chinatown and all the other things. Fair enough. Now everyone has a toilet, everyone has a shower, and blah, blah. But you know, as Italian, where arts is plenty everywhere and monument. I think that now we have really to think twice before building. And we have to start seeing what we can redevelop for what we have, the existing part of it, you know. And we have also started to do things in a way that match our profile. Population is aging here, and this is not the end. It opens a lot of opportunity because we can become leader in urban mobility for people above 65. Joking about it, but you know, it's a market of product or service or psychologists, you know, because mental health is the other part of it. Now we are more mental unstable than we are used to be. Jin, is not your fault. But honestly speaking, living your life on TikTok or all the other things, you you know, you are always against the Jones, not even up with the Jones, you are against the Jones. We get all worn out because 15 kids has been shot in another country. It's a horrible, sad news, you know, which alter our status here, where kids are not shot at, you know. So this is what I'm trying to say. Let's focus on what practical things we can do, like a better urban furnishing, using building that we have, thinking of how our population, Singaporean population evolved and how architecturally we can answer to it, you know, all this type of thing. For me, this is exciting, and we'll be even more excited when we are there. And these are also things that can be exported, because in Europe, people are aging too. In US, they are aging too, if they're not shot before. You know? Not too much.
The thing about the aging society, yes, I think that's something that we can probably do a lot more for, because the narrative on that is generally about health, and it's about, you know, the eventual demise. Whereas you can look at it as well. You've got this many years still, and if you're fit and you're able and you have the means, then how do you make the most of it? How do you live better? And not necessarily longer, but I think it's more the quality of your life that
Now
matters.
you contribute also.
Yes.
Jin,
Jin, for yourself, in terms of the communications that we have here, do you think that we do enough to excite people, or do we just do straight communication too much?
I think Singaporeans, we've been exposed to the outside world, outside of Singapore, too much. So much so that there is a lot of, I won't call it disdain, but we're just, you know, it's local, you know, then I don't really pay that much attention to it, just because it's local. When we were having a conversation, right, a friend once said, you know, let's not waste a pandemic. Right? And it took a pandemic and 2 years of isolation for us to discover the things that we have within our small little red dot. Right? Places that we never knew existed, things that we never knew we could do. Right? Take for example, in the 2 years, people kind of rediscovered cycling. And then all of a sudden, right? Oh, you see a lot of men in spandex riding on the roads. But before that, you know, these guys used to go overseas just to take part in triathlons and all that. And then in terms of culture, right? We were on a route of rediscovery. Geylang, for example, nobody knew that, you know, that there were these nooks and corners. We only knew that Geylang was only famous for two things: the red light district and food. Right? Nobody actually took a second look at the Geylang architecture, which is pretty interesting. Right? And in terms of arts and culture, because, you know, we couldn't fly in, we couldn't import culture. We had to create our own culture, and then we had to innovate. So when there were no physical performances, you know, there was online performances being streamed live, right, from a theater. So what I'm trying to say is that we should try to make our own excitement and not rely on the government to create that excitement for us, right? Because we have been kind of programmed to rely on the government to do all sorts of things. And when there's a shortage of excitement, right, we say that, oh, Singapore is a very boring country, you know, 42 by 20 over kilometers, and within that, right, there is really not much things to do. After you have visited all the points of interest, but the point is that don't go to the points of interest. Don't only rely on those points of interest. A journey of discovery is all about yourself. And that's what we have been trying to do in the 2 years of communication. I don't know whether it has worked, really, because short of importing stuff, we created our own. I don't know the kind of reception that Singaporeans have towards that kind of communication, right? We definitely tried to pressure cook within the 2 years, right? To try to create as much excitement as possible. Look at Klook, during those 2 years, they were selling all sorts of different tours, right? Yeah, so to the extent of whether the communications has been effective, I don't know, right? I've not heard back from Singaporeans. Is it due to the dearth of choices, or do we really appreciate our rediscovery?
So you've raised some issues there. I mean, a lot of it has to do with you talk about Geylang and the architecture, and so there are many things that perhaps over time people would have forgotten or has been replaced by other things. And for a younger generation, they don't get a chance to explore those things until attention is drawn to it, right? So how much of our history is exciting enough to talk about a lot more than it is being discussed? Emma, would you say that you understand Singapore's history well enough and you've been to many of these places and you've seen it as your generation, or are you just looking to the future more than anything else? Is there excitement in the past?
Yeah. Well, I can't say for sure that I know enough of Singapore's history, but I think this brings to mind like one interesting encounter I had was actually I went on this audio walk by Open House. So they did an audio walk tour around Jalan Besar, and so you could listen to a soundtrack and you could walk around, and then you get transported back in time to the 1960s. And then I realized that actually Jalan Besar was home to a very thriving nightlife scene, right, with New World Park and the amusement center and all. And I think that experience was quite formative for me because I was like, excitement doesn't just really have to be localized to spaces. It could also be across time. Yeah, so I think, and I think that it was actually quite a good example of how multi-sensorial kind of experiences in technology can be used to sort of do the retelling of history to make places relevant, and history also relevant for like the younger generation. And I feel like that model of like audio tours in like any kind of district can actually be replicated on like a much larger scale for like different parts of Singapore too. Yeah.
So if I could just jump in, and actually, Jin, in a way, Emma's response suggests that you have been successful, right? In some ways that, if Emma is representative of a particular generation, then it looks like there is a kind of embracing, of all the cultural assets that we have and the kind of openness, which I think is more important, to kind of explore and understand it more. I think everything that you talked about just now about, how many of us, especially the older generation perhaps, who have been traveling and very exposed to Western modes of thinking, we all love Italy, of course, huh? We love Europe, but, sometimes in our pursuit of what our own life goals, we kind of don't look at what we have immediately at hand, and I think that does seem to be shifting. I'm happy to see, but it does take time, right? I mean, in cultural studies, we talk about something called cultural cringe and cultural fringe, right? So you have a fringe, you put your own stuff to the fringe, and you get a sense of cringe about it. And I think that is changing. I'm happy to say that. And I like to think that some of it is self-organized from the bottoms up. I also think some of the support, whether it's from Heritage Board or Arts Council, I mean, the Arts Council did fund the Open House audio tour, for example, right? I think that plays a part as well. So hopefully it's that whole co-creation business that we talked about as well. Thanks.
In fact, if I may interject a moment. In fact, I think that this will greatly contribute to make Singapore more exciting. Paul, is Singapore focus on Singapore and on surrounding here, which is what is not often found when you come from Europe. But I have a question. And do Singaporean students study history? Question mark. It's not a provocative thing. It's just, I don't know, you know? Because I know that Singaporean students excel in STEM. Science, technology, engineering, maths, fantastic. But do they study history? Because if you don't have roots, you don't have wings. It's a fact of life, you know? So, great, Emma, fantastic. And fantastic that you're also passionate for this audio tour that you have done. It revealed you something. But I repeat, I think it's fundamental if story is taught in Singapore school. Not to be perfect, never history is perfect, as they say, is always to fit someone agenda, generally the winner. If you look at Second World War, told by one part of the other in Europe, it's different. But we have to tell the story of Singapore. In a Singapore version, there will be someone who will say, no, it's not exactly like that. And it's okay, because it's a difference of opinion, you know? So my question is really this one. Do Singaporeans learn history in school? Because this will contribute to make the place exciting.
I think we do get a liberal doses of history. It's available for if you're curious enough to want to go and look for it. But I think maybe the spark may not be fired up. Not sure. Emma, what was it like for you? I mean, did you get a sense of Singapore's history as you were growing up? Did you study it?
Well, wait, this brings me back, a couple of years. I think I really enjoyed the history education that I had in school. We didn't just do Singapore history, we did like Southeast Asian history, international history. But I do agree with you, Roberto, that it is quite like history is always written by the victor. It was quite sanitized. It was to push for certain larger agendas. But then, and that's why I also feel that it's the onus on us students to make the content come alive for us. To go out and read alternative recounts and retellings of history, and to sort of make the content exciting, through the audio tours, by going for talks, speaking with historians. So I think there's only so much that we can achieve in in that school setting, and the rest is really on us students to make it come alive for us.
Great. There's a question here from Yumun. He was talking about the non-mainstream theatre, for instance, that he enjoys in New York and London, the off-Broadway and the likes. Do we have anything of that nature, the non-mainstream? Are there opportunities for that to exist and maybe grow and develop its own sort of culture here?
Short answer for me is yes. I mean, I think there is some. I did type my reply that perhaps we can celebrate more of that. The question is whether in Singapore with its high cost structures, right, whether it is easy for someone to do something really non-mainstream. You have the issues of space, rentals, and actual operating costs. So the question to ask everyone, I mean, is, are you willing to pay for it? Whether it's you pay as a customer, or whether you're okay with the taxpayers' dollars being used to fund non-mainstream things. I think that's where it's at. There's some of that, but perhaps there can be more of that celebrating of the non-mainstream. It's a complex issue. We could easily go on an hour on that one, I think, alone.
Yeah, quite true. Could be a topic of discussion down the line as well. But okay, so we're coming up to time. We are on time already. If I could just get from each of you the one exciting thing that you would like to see taking place in the near future or even the distant future. Roberto, let's start with you.
I think that from the business standpoint, I would like to see the developing or refinement on certain things. For instance, we used to be a place where people come for exhibitions. Then we are not a big market, as a fact. In fact, very few exhibitions are successful now here in Singapore. Very, very few. One on computer, another one on food and euthanasia. But our mice is shrinking. But how about a mice of idea? That's why I was telling, if we have some innovative way to redesign the city, if we have some innovative idea in which we can develop things for elderly, if we are better a circular economy, all these things in which you can show idea in people rather than just product, I think will be very exciting to have it here in Singapore. And we also will change the perception that there is from outside Singapore looking in. So this I think will excite me. Apart from, I would like to have more music, and I would like to have cheaper jazz, because there are few places and they found very difficult to survive, because as Paul say, it's very expensive, the rent, you know, and it's very expensive the alcohol, and it's very expensive. So you sit there, you listen a little bit of music, and you spend $80.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you go to the recent jazz festival, Singapore Jazz in July, at the Esplanade, and with $30-40 you have fantastic shows from all over the world. So we have to find this balance. But how many people go there? So we have also to make sure that certain places rent is affordable. Last things, and I don't take the place of anyone more. Gillman Barracks, because it's, you know, it's something that hurts me very, very much. Go there. If there is not the Singapore Art Week, is a desert. No one goes there. You enter in a gallery and there is a person that is about to cut his wrist because haven't seen a human for the last week. You know, only 1 or 2 restaurants. You know, it's sad. Why don't give free space to artists? Why you don't bring the things that there is in Blanco Court where they sell paper and color and the things? Why you don't take some of the Sota or Nanyang or LaSalle and put a faculty there? Get some students around. Make a little bit of noise. Wow.
I think so much has been covered already in this discussion. I'll just maybe add a minor point about excitement. Well, I mean, we talked about looking local, but I would expand that a little, looking regional. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff in the region. So it is not just looking at Singapore and just looking at the West, right? But also, I think our immediate region. And I think sometimes our Singaporeans we maybe because of the strong dollar, you know, we tend to see Southeast Asia in a certain way, you know, as a place to have a quick getaway. But, you know, this is 500 million with thousands of years of history and such a diverse culture that I think it is a pity that we don't understand, harness some of those cultures and creative energies there. So that's my wish.
Thanks, Paul. Jin, how about you? One exciting thing for the future.
I would like to answer that in a different way, right? Instead of one exciting thing, I would like Singaporeans to stop being so practical, to have a cost-benefit analysis on everything that we do, right? And if we set our expectations or don't have any expectations going into something, when you watch a movie, right, just watch it for, you know, the 2 hours of mindless entertainment, and then you come out, right, you enjoy it, and yeah, maybe, you know, the excitement will be there, right, watching a movie. But because, you know, we've been conditioned in such a way that we are so practical, and our expectations are so high, we tend to get very blasé about everything that's happening around us, right? So go walk into some place that you have been before without any expectations, and you find that you find excitement there because you discover something new, right? Yeah.
Great. And Emma, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think like Jin, I also hope to see like a shift in like social attitudes. But I think like what Roberto alluded to earlier on, that excitement is very much a mindset, it's a lifestyle, and that everyone, regardless of like age, gender, socioeconomic statuses, like they all have a right to experience excitement and to create excitement. And I think like once our social attitudes shift, then people will feel more empowered, and there'll be that greater capacity for like co-creation between people of very different backgrounds. And the rest, I believe, would follow suit, and we would see more exciting like possibilities and opportunities, coming out.
Okay, there's a few points raised here about busking. One solution would be to de-link busking from charity. It's about charity and not talent being the main reason for that. That's from Audrey Pereira, who started WOMED here. So I think that there are a lot of issues that can be raised in this discussion, and more could be raised, I'm sure. But a lot of it comes back to, are we too practical as a society? I mean, as Jin said, the cost analysis is what we're putting. Are we going to get an ROI on it? Are we going to get how much of an increment in the benefits are going to be returned to the funding agencies? Maybe, but maybe in all of this, it's about unlocking more of our imagination, our willingness to imagine and see things that are not there, develop things for ourselves, for our communities, without having to rely on the big hand feeding us all the time. Take more active participation and involvement in the things that we do, that we can do, we are able to do, and within our small communities, pockets of interesting activities, exciting things taking place, makes for more, makes for a lively ecosystem that could eventually develop. So an open mind is what we should be looking out for. But thanks again to Roberto, Jin, Paul, and Emma for your various views, and to the points from the audience as well. There's a lot of excitement up ahead. Let's imagine it and realize some of it at least. Have a great week ahead. Thank you.